Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's program, President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to do everything to defeat Russia this year as the first Leopard tanks arrived in Ukraine on the anniversary of the start of Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Heavy snow fell in Southern California as the first blizzard in a generation pounded the hills around Los Angeles, with heavy rains threatening flooding in other places. The World Meteorological Organization warns that exceptional rainfall is expected in Mozambique as Tropical Storm Freddy roars in. The death toll from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria that struck on February 6 surpassed 50,000. First tonight, President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to do everything to defeat Russia this year as the first Leopard tanks arrived in Ukraine on the anniversary of the start of Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Take a look.
We withstood this year. We started to free our land from Russian evil. We are in the return of security to international relations. And you and I can make this year 2023 to be the year of the end of Russian aggression, the year of the return to peace, the year of the liberation of our land and our people from Russian captivity. Now, in the non-public part of our meeting, I would like to focus on what Ukraine needs so that our coalition of defenders of freedom becomes a coalition of winners in 2023.
Demonstrators protesting Moscow's aggression march in cities across Europe to mark the invasion anniversary. In Berlin, activists placed a Russian tank wreck in front of the Russian embassy. Crowds fell silent for a minute from Tallinn to London, while key European buildings were draped or lit up in the blue and yellow colors of Ukraine's flag. The Eiffel Tower in Paris, the National Theatre in Warsaw, and the European Commission's building in Brussels were lit up in the blue and yellow colors of Ukraine's flag. A lot of tears, but we will win soon, says a Ukrainian refugee during a protest to mark the first anniversary of the war in front of the United Nations, where the Security Council holds a special meeting on Ukraine. Take a look.
Very sorry, because in this year was a lot of tears, a lot of cry, a lot of died people, a lot of refugees, millions of refugees, and a lot of horror, a lot of fear, a lot. But also I want to tell that this year also it's a lot of support from all the world. It's a lot of fighting of our country, it's bravery, unbelievable, incredible. I'm very proud of my nation.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for peace in Ukraine during a Security Council meeting on the anniversary of the war, calling life there a living hell. Again, let's listen in. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls for peace in Ukraine during a Security Council meeting on the anniversary of the war, calling life there a living hell. Take a look.
Life is a living hell for the people of Ukraine. An estimated 17.6 million people, nearly 40% of the population of Ukraine, require humanitarian assistance and protection. The crisis has erased 30% of pre-war jobs. The World Food Programme estimates that nearly 40% of Ukrainians are unable to afford or access enough food. And the war has sparked a displacement crisis not seen in Europe in decades.
Ukraine will resist, as it has done so far. And Ukraine will win. Putin is going to lose much sooner than he thinks. Here is what Russian officials and servicemen have to know. You think you would get away with what you did? No. You will end up on trial. You will be testifying how strongly you were opposed to the aggression and how you just followed orders. You think that the world will get tired of supporting Ukraine? The support will only get stronger.
No member of this council should call for peace while supporting Russia's war on Ukraine and on the UN Charter. In this war, there is an aggressor and there is a victim. Russia fights for conquest. Ukraine fights for its freedom. If Russia stops fighting and leaves Ukraine, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. The fact remains, one man, Vladimir Putin, started this war. One man can end it.
Не дал киевскому режиму заключить мир в марте-апреле прошлого года. Наших западных коллег сейчас все устраивает. Русские и украинцы убивают друг друга. Западные оборонные концерны получают баснословные прибыли и полигон для испытания нового оружия. НАТО, избавляясь от старого оружия, потихоньку перевооружается. А Вашингтон заодно еще и ослабляет своих европейских конкурентов, проявляющих невиданную доселе степень раболепия и импотенции. Об этом мы подробно говорили в этом зале вчера.
有的国家在乌克兰问题上强调主权和领土完整，同时却在公然干涉别国内政，破坏别国主权和领土完整，这是赤裸裸的双重标准，国际社会看得很清楚。
I thank His Excellency Mr. Blinken for his.
Meanwhile, the first Leopard tanks arrived in Ukraine on the anniversary of the start of Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Poland sent the German-made tanks to help Ukraine repel Russian troops. Poland will send more tanks to Ukraine. In a few days, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki he said this in Kiev after Warsaw announced the dispatch of 4 Leopard 2 tanks. Poland has been one of Ukraine's staunchest supporters since Russia launched its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year, urging its NATO and EU allies to ramp up military aid to the war-torn country. Poland has stepped up its own arms purchases, raising its military budget this year to more than 4% of GDP. The country is also host to more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees. Earlier this week, Warsaw hosted U.S. President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, diplomats from around 30 countries stood together in front of the UN in Geneva in a show of solidarity with Ukraine on Friday's first anniversary of the Russian invasion. They joined Yevgenia Filipenko, Ukraine's ambassador to the UN, standing behind 2 large Ukrainian flags, with some wearing the yellow and blue colors as lapel ribbons. Opera singer Daria Mikolenko sang the Ukrainian national anthem holding the country's flag. Mothers and daughters held hands while some brought their babies and others wore yellow flowers in their hair. Ambassador Filipenko said many diplomats from Europe, but also from Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia were among those standing beside her on Friday. Now, earlier, China called for urgent peace talks as it released a plan to end the war in Ukraine. Several Western powers rebuffed the proposals and also warned against Beijing's close ties to Moscow. Let's listen in.
你提到了今天中方发布的关于政治解决乌克兰危机的中国立
China's position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. First, I would like to provide more details. President Xi Jinping has put forward 4 principles, joint efforts in 4 areas and 3 observations on Ukraine, which outlines China's fundamental approach to the issue. We take an objective and just position on the Ukraine issue, work actively to promote peace talks, and play a constructive role in facilitating a resolution to the crisis. 1 year since the full escalation of the crisis, we have formulated and released the position document, laying out our basic position and propositions. The document covers 12 aspects, namely respecting the sovereignty of all countries, abandoning the Cold War mentality, ceasing hostilities, resuming peace talks, resolving the humanitarian crisis, protecting civilians and prisoners of war, keeping nuclear power plants safe, reducing strategic risks, facilitating grain exports, stopping unilateral sanctions, keeping industrial and supply chains stable, and promoting post-conflict reconstruction. On this basis, China stands ready to continue working with the international community to contribute to the political settlement. The Ukraine issue has complex historical backgrounds. China takes a just and objective position on this issue, and we have been committed to promoting peace talks. We stand on the side of peace and dialogue. That is the right side of the history. China would like to start from the position paper and work with the rest of the world to contribute to the political settlement of the crisis.
On the proposals and the points presented by China, so first of all, China doesn't have much credibility because they have not been able to condemn the illegal invasion of Ukraine. And they also signed, just days before the invasion, an agreement between President Xi and President Putin on limitless partnership with Russia.
Eine überwältigende Mehrheit der Staaten in den Vereinten Nationen hat gestern bekräftigt, wenn Friede einkehren soll, dann muss es ein gerechter und dauerhafter Friede sein. Jeder konstruktive Vorschlag, der uns auf dem Weg zum gerechten Frieden näher bringt, ist hochwillkommen. Ob die Weltmacht China eine solche konstruktive Rolle spielen will, ist noch fraglich.
The PRC has been providing important support to Russia over the course of this last year. They attempt to maintain this veneer of neutrality, professing to the world that they're not taking a side, but they've clearly chosen a side. In the weeks leading up to this invasion, when it was crystal clear, at least should have been crystal clear to the PRC, what Russia intended, they signed this communique, 5,000-word communique that spoke of a partnership without limits. Over the course of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, the PRC has provided diplomatic support, they've provided political support, they provided economic support. They have echoed and parroted Russia's propaganda, its lies, its distortions, its mistruths, in an effort to shield Russia and to propagate what it is trying to feed the world, a steady diet of disinformation and lies.
China's 12-point paper calling for a political settlement of the crisis follows accusations from the West that China is considering arming Russia, and that is a claim Beijing has dismissed as false. It also makes clear its opposition to not only the use of nuclear weapons, but the threat of deploying them. Now that's after Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened to use Moscow's atomic arsenal in the conflict. In a video addressed to mark the Defender of the Fatherland Day, the Russian president hailed the country's soldiers fighting in Ukraine and pledged to pay increased attention to Russia's nuclear capabilities. Take a look.
Современные, эффективные армия и флот – залог безопасности и суверенитета страны. Гарантия ее стабильного развития, ее будущего. И потому укреплению обороноспособности мы, как и прежде, будем уделять приоритетное внимание. Повышенное внимание, как и раньше, уделим укреплению ядерной триады. В этом году на боевое дежурство заступают первые пусковые установки ракетного комплекса «Сармат» с новой тяжелой ракетой. Продолжим серийное производство гиперзвуковых комплексов воздушного базирования «Кинжал» и начнем массовые поставки гиперзвуковых ракет морского базирования «Циркон».
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky told reporters he was planning to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping after the leader's government called for the peace talks, saying it would be important for world security. The Ukrainian president also said he was doing his best to prevent Chinese arms supplies to Russia to avoid any risk of World War III. Zelensky didn't say when or where he was planning to meet President Xi, but expressed hope that China would support a just peace and Ukraine. Zelensky also said he was convinced that only a country whose territory is under attack can initiate any peace initiatives. Now, the war has brought knock-on effects for the cost of food, heat, and shelter, three of humanity's most basic needs, from developing countries in Africa to affluent Europe. A global cost of living crisis is already here, according to the World Economic Forum in its annual Global Risk Report for this year, noting that the pressures had already been mounting even before the COVID-19 struck.
Even before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we had energy prices going up. We had oil prices going up quite sharply because we had a pretty strong recovery from the pandemic as a consequence of substantial stimulus that was provided, both in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policy, to the world as a whole. So that generated a big, sharp increase in demand without the supply coming through very quickly. It was also a period when people were spending a lot on goods as opposed to services because the pandemic was not over and so people were still hesitant to go to restaurants. They were buying a lot of goods, and so we saw a global component of goods inflation rising everywhere. And of course, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we had a double knock on energy prices. It was different, it was really bad in parts of the world like Europe, where you had gas prices go up 3 to 4 times. So these were several of the factors that drove the inflation. And of course, what's bringing it down now is the slowing global economy.
Meanwhile, the Philippine government called on parties involved in the ongoing Ukraine war to settle the conflict peacefully as the world marks 1 full year since Russia launched a military attack on the East European state. On the first anniversary of Russia's launch of special military operations in Ukraine, the Philippines continues to call on the parties to settle the conflict through peaceful and diplomatic means, the Department of Foreign Affairs said in a statement. The agency noted that Manila had backed a total of 5 UN resolutions supporting the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Ukraine and other UN member states. In the telephone call between President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier this month, President Marcos assured Ukraine of the Philippines' continuing support and participation in any effort to reach a peaceful resolution of the crisis, according to the DFA. President Marcos further conveyed that the Philippines is with Ukraine in its search for peace. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said the free world is indebted to Ukrainians fighting to defend European values, and she vowed to continue to support Kiev 1 year after Russia's invasion. Our correspondent from Italy, Mia San Vicente Abad, reports from Rome.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni heads to Kiev for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Meloni, who took office in October, has repeatedly expressed a desire to visit Ukraine to demonstrate her government's support following Russia's invasion almost exactly 1 year ago. Italy is a NATO member and has provided cash and weapons to help Ukraine. Earlier this month, Italy also agreed to send mobile surface-to-air missile systems that it has jointly developed with France.
L'Ucraina non è e non sarà sola perché sta difendendo anche i valori di libertà e democrazia su cui nasce l'identità europea e le fondamenta stesse del diritto internazionale, senza il quale varrebbe solo la forza militare e ogni Stato del mondo rischierebbe di essere invaso dal proprio vicino. Non possiamo consentirlo ed è nostro dovere lavorare per arrivare a una pace giusta. Il mondo libero è debitore nei confronti delle donne e degli uomini ucraini. L'Italia è dalla loro parte.
Reporting from Rome, Italy, I am Mia San Vicente Abad, reminding you to stay alert because we live in extraordinary times.
More than 160,000 asylum seekers were waiting for an initial decision on their claim at the end of December, up 60% for the same period in 2021. The figures have been released as Rishi Sunak's government plans a new questionnaire to speed up the process. Our correspondent from the United Kingdom, Jericho Season, reports from London.
The UK plans to fast-track certain asylum applications as official data released Thursday showed the backlog of those waiting for decision hit a record number of over 160,000. This is a food bank in the West Midlands where the vast majority of recipients are asylum seekers. It's set up to support people while they wait for their forms to be processed. These people are trapped in a buckling system, unable to officially work or go on with their lives. This asylum seeker from Eritrea is facing an anxious wait in London as she waits to find out whether she will be deported to Rwanda.
Every day I stand up at the morning and I sit to the home in the hotel. I sit all the day, nothing to do, nothing. No school, no home, no work, no anything. But sometimes I see in my phone, in the Facebook or in YouTube, I see the news, and that's is not good for the refugee or the people, or for me not good, because I try a lot of things and a lot of days. No good in France, no food, no thing to sleep, no home. Yeah, when I think about Rwanda, I cannot sleep in the night because I have a lot of problem in my life before, and now come a new problem.
Those who are eligible for the new policy will be sent a 10-page questionnaire rather than automatically face an interview. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pledged to reduce the backlog by the end of the year. But new figures show a total of 160,919 asylum seekers were waiting a decision as of December 31, and 109,641 among them have been waiting for more than 6 months, a record number. In December, Sunak vowed to stop the boats crossing the channel. More than 45,000 migrants crossed the channel to the UK from mainland Europe in 2022, surpassing the previous year's record by more than 17,000. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, this is Jericho Season, reminding you to stay alert because we live in extraordinary times.
In other news, heavy snow fell in Southern California as the first blizzard in a generation pounded the hills around Los Angeles, with heavy rains threatening flooding in other places. Take a look. Major roads were closed as ice and snow made them impassable, including sections of Interstate 5, the main north-south highway that connects Mexico, California, the Pacific Northwest, and Canada. Authorities also said there was no estimate when it would be reopened. For people at those lower elevations, heavy rain on Friday was sparking warnings of inundations and landslides. A flood watch was in place for portions of Ventura, Los Angeles, and Santa Barbara, counties where up to an inch of rain was expected in an hour. Winter weather was also making life difficult in other parts of the West, with roads closed in Wyoming and Oregon, reporting near-record snow. The heavy weather continued to snarl flights and several days of misery for air travelers. More than 370 flights into, out of, or around the U.S. had been canceled by 2300 GMT Friday, with almost 6,000 more delayed.
Oh my God, look, it's beautiful.
To the earthquake now in Turkey and Syria. The death toll from the earthquakes there that struck on February 6 have already surpassed 50,000. Shamshik Mohammed, a 9-year-old Syrian girl whose fate captured the tragedy, hope, and heartbreak of this month's earthquake after spending 40 hours under the rubble, is taken to Turkey for treatment with her brother Omar, 15. Local officials told AFP that she may have to have her legs amputated, suffering what doctors call crush syndrome. Take a look.
شام وضعها يعني هي نتيجة الزلزال صار معها هرس المتلازمة بإجريها من الركبة وتحت، وضعها حرج شوي، يعني إجريها شوي تعبانات، وحولوها على تركيا، ونأمل من الله الشفاء إن شاء الله إلها ولكل المصابين.
يا عم نزلنا.
يلا يلا تكرم.
ممنوعان.
White Helmets rescuers in rebel-held northwest Syria called on international help to save people with quake-related crush injuries after a boy they rescued died from the condition. The group had spearheaded rescue efforts in rebel-held areas with virtually no outside help after a 7.8 magnitude quake that struck war-torn Syria and Turkey on February 6. Unfortunately, Arslan Berry, one of the children we had saved, has passed away, according to White Helmet's chief Raed Saleh. And he said the world must stand with children and all those affected by crush syndrome. He said, urging the International Committee of the Red Cross to act and urgently respond to such cases. Now, crush syndrome is a condition that occurs in limbs starved of blood circulation for too long and can cause kidney failure, cardiac, and other potentially fatal complications. Now, the death toll from floods and landslides in southeast Brazil has risen to 54 people. According to the Sao Paulo state government, about 30 people are still missing after more than an entire February's worth of rain fell in 24 hours on the picturesque beach resort town of São Sebastião and surrounding areas last week. Authorities said the largest daily rainfall ever registered in Brazil triggered violent floods and landslides that tore through precariously built hillside communities. Search and rescue operations are continuing in areas where some 4,000 people were displaced from their homes. An estimated 9.5 million of Brazil's 215 million people live in areas at high risk of flooding or landslides, mainly poor favela neighborhoods. And the World Meteorological Organization warning that exceptional rainfall is now expected in Mozambique as Tropical Storm Freddy roars in. Flooding could impact 1.75 million people in the southeastern African country. Take a look.
Tropical Cyclone Freddy hit Madagascar earlier this week with strong winds and high seas, and literally as I'm speaking, it's now threatening Mozambique with not so much the winds here, but it's very, very dangerous and exceptional rainfall levels. Météo France issued a warning of intense rainfall south of Beira, which is close to landfall, exceeding 200 to 300 millimeters, and locally 400 millimeters in 72 hours. That is immense. The soils in Mozambique are already saturated. The river basin levels are already past alert level because there have been very, very heavy seasonal rainfalls so far. And so we shouldn't underestimate, the threat of this additional rain. The Mozambique's National Disaster Management Authority said that the flooding could affect up to 1.75 million people, and our colleagues at OCHA warned that the confluence of multiple threats is compounding a severe humanitarian situation in Mozambique.
Now, Mozambique is preparing itself for Tropical Storm Freddy. Heavy rain and strong winds leave areas flooded and some roads blocked by fallen trees. Cyclone Freddy is expected to land in regions between central and southern Mozambique, more than 500 kilometers north of the capital Maputo, and could reach Zimbabwe. In other news, Trip Inspo is awaiting at the 2023 Los Angeles Travel and Adventure Show. Eva and Alan Basalyahe reports.
Globally, the travel industry had been taking it on the chin because of the pandemic, but now domestic and international trips are rebounding.
And so too are events like Los Angeles Travel and Adventure Show, where destination experts help globe-trotting wanderers plan their next big adventure.
Everyone wants to go to Japan in the spring season, and we highly recommend it. On this tour package, you will be able to experience and see all these lovely cherry blossoms everywhere. I feel like Japan has a lot of scenic locations to visit. They have mountains, rivers. They have a lot of good places to visit.
We try to bring to this trade show the Brazil experience. So we have a little bit of everything. We have Brazilian music going on, and then we also have Brazilian food here. We're also holding some events to travel advisors to show a little bit of our destinations, how to get there, how to do business with Brazil in terms of the travel industry.
We are providing Korean street food, which is named bungeoppang. When you go to Korea, you can find this kind of food, street food, everywhere. We enjoy mingling with people. We especially love Filipino. That's why, you know what, the number 1 or 2 source market to visit Philippines is Korea. Korean people love Boracay, Cebu, and Manila. Filipinos, like us, we are very similar. The only things between us is just the sea.
To truly experience different cultures, travel show host Rick Steves recommends people to live like a native.
If you are eating and sleeping in a way that you're in your own culture in a high-rise American-style hotel, and you venture out, you're cutting your experience in half for no reason. So I want the immersion. I want to stay in a comfortable, well-located hotel that connects me with the culture. I want to be a cultural chameleon. I want to eat and drink what the local people drink. I don't want to stay on the rooftop of my hotel and eat what other Americans are eating. My basic mission is to inspire and equip Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And Europe is a good first step, and if you have a good trip, then the whole world becomes your playground.
Attendees not only discover places to visit, but once they arrive there, also bring the know-how they learned from this show to fit in as one of the locals.
Speaking of, I thought you were going with a traditional Polynesian outfit.
Nope. Nobody needs to see me in that.
Evan Allen, Los Angeles, California. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
AI is giving voice to tracheostomy patients, and virtual reality technology trains cops in Mexico City. This and much more from our correspondent at large, Thomas Likeness.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Let me tell you about a breakthrough in the care of people who cannot talk because they've had a tracheostomy. Artificial intelligence is giving these people a voice. This app uses artificial intelligence to lip read patients. Nathan Armstrong is a patient at Royal Preston Hospital in Preston, England. Now, because Armstrong has had a tracheostomy, the only way he can speak is by pressing a button on the tube in his neck. And he says that's painful. But using the app, says Armstrong, has had a big impact on his life. Watch now how he can use it to communicate with his nurse.
Good morning, Nathan. How are you today?
I'm in pain.
You're in pain. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll go and see if we've got any pain relief due, okay? Is there anything else I can get you?
Doctor.
The doctor, okay. Actually, they just started the ward round, so they'll be coming here very shortly.
Nurse Linda Phillips says this app makes patients feel less isolated.
Being a real godsend because it gives a voice to patients that haven't got a voice. Quite often, you know, they try and mouth words, and with the best will in the world, it is very difficult to lip read some patients. So it's made a huge difference, not only to the patient, but to the families as well, because, you know, we're helping them, stopping them get frustrated.
Another breakthrough in the high-tech world. High-tech is also helping these cops in Mexico City train for dangerous real-life situations. These officers are training in the first virtual reality training center in Latin America. Now, in this scenario, they're trying to free a girl who has been kidnapped by an armed man at a market. The virtual crime takes place in a neighborhood with high levels of violence. The officers are wearing goggles that project them onto the crime scene. One instructor says it's a complete change in the way they do their training. By going through this exercise, officers can see the mistakes they make and learn how they can improve. Oops! This is a sound you do not want to hear at an art exhibition, but it happened last week at a contemporary art fair in downtown Miami. A woman attending the show got a little too close to a shiny blue porcelain sculpture created by renowned artist Jeff Koons. The work was about a foot high, and it's part of his Balloon Dog series of porcelain sculptures. Apparently, this visitor had accidentally kicked the podium the exhibit was on. That knocked the piece over, sending it plummeting to the ground, where there it lay shattered into pieces. The hall went silent. Value of this work, $42,000. As the gallery manager says, that's why you have insurance. One of the things about road trips to places you've never been to before is the things you see along the way. My wife was gone on a trip last week with friends from our church. They drove about 2,000 kilometers from our home in Edmonton to a place called Whitehorse. That's up in the Arctic in Canada's Yukon Territory. At a place called Watson Lake, they stopped at an attraction called Signpost Forest. And that's exactly what it is. It's a collection of signposts that travelers from around the world have been bringing from their hometowns. Now, this tradition dates back to the World War II days when the Alaska Highway project was being built. American soldier Carl K. Lindley spent some time in Watson Lake recovering from an injury. A commanding officer ordered Lindley to repair and erect directional signposts. So, while completing the job, he added one of his own from his hometown of Danville, Illinois. And so it began. More than 50 years later, in 1990, a couple from Ohio added the 10,000th sign. And today, well, there's more than 77,000 signs in that forest. And the number grows each year as more visitors pass through. I'll be back in 7 days, and in the meantime, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, correspondent at large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
And finally, in Hawaii, 17-year-old Arthur, along with his dad, recently worked on a dish that is best served when shared with friends or loved ones for that next social event. Prepare your taste buds for this feature. Take a look. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.